Well, first, I'd like to thank you so much for having me. I am honored to be here. And actually, I've been meaning to join the League of Women Voters for 2 years. And between a pandemic and having a baby, I haven't done that yet. So this is really good inspiration. At some point in the next 2 weeks, it's on my to-do list I've already been on the website. I know how much it costs. And anyway, so thank you so much for having me. I am Katie Leonard. I'm chair of the Los Alamos Resiliency, Energy, and Sustainability Task Force. And while today I'm sort of the face of the La Res Task Force, I'm just one of many hardworking task force members, and I should share my screen so I can acknowledge them. Here we go. It's not going to be in full presentation mode because I need to see my notes too. Anyway, and I am joining you from my car because we're getting new windows and there's all kinds of like drilling and sanding going on. So I just wanted a quiet place. Anyway, so I'm gonna move down to the next slide. So this is our list of task members, and they've all contributed to our interim report, which we submitted to County Council in August, and it contains recommendations on how to reduce our county's greenhouse gas emissions. Today's presentation is kind of a general overview of our task force's preliminary recommendations. And while I don't mind if people jump in with quick questions, I think it's probably more efficient to just go through the PowerPoint because I might answer one of your questions. And so I guess we'll just take questions at the end. Okay, I'd also just like to briefly acknowledge and thank our wonderful community volunteer subcommittee members who've contributed to this interim report, as well as the county staff for their interest, their time, their expertise, and their insight. They are so great. We really appreciate them. So the task, just for a little background, the task force was formed from a citizen petition requesting action on climate change. The charter was approved by the County Council in December of 2020, and the task force members were appointed in February of this year. Since the formation of the group, our 5 subcommittees, which you can see here, have been doing a lot of research and have been looking into what other communities are doing about climate change, and have been connecting with county staff to see what's already in the works here. These are big and expansive topics, and we're trying to figure out how, as a community, we're going to walk into a future with climate change in the most resilient way possible. And there are pieces of this huge puzzle that we have not yet addressed, and it will be ongoing work. After recommendation from the task force, Los Alamos County has joined this coalition of Sustainable Communities New Mexico, who is helping support this task force and its charter to create recommendations on how to tackle climate change. This coalition is made up of cities and counties from across the state: Albuquerque, Cruces, Santa Fe, Los Alamos, and we're kind of working together to make some changes happen. So it's really nice to see that other people in the state are working on this and have found some good solutions and are maybe even paving the way for other places. So today's aim is to familiarize you with where we are in our recommendations, what we've learned and seen other communities successfully do. And I really look forward to your feedback. These recommendations are not set in stone in any way and have already changed before the final submission. So the final document will not look exactly like what I talk about here. It should be pretty close. But we're very interested in community feedback. So at the end, I'll give you the task force email address if you'd like to submit changes. I can also forward you the actual interim report if you'd like to read that. If you have more spare time than I do, we would love any feedback that you have on that as well. So moving on here, we have 6 general recommendations, probably will end up being 7 or 8. Recommendation 0 is establish net zero greenhouse gas emissions as a long-term goal for county government and the community as a whole. This is exclusive of LANL, and LANL is always the gorilla in the room that we can't talk about, but of course has a huge impact here in our community. And so we are working on how to make them a partner in this, but our charter specifically cannot address LANL's greenhouse gas emissions. Moving on to number 1, perform a baseline greenhouse gas emissions study from which to set reduction targets and other goals, and against which to measure progress. This can be done in-house by the county, or it could be farmed out to a consulting firm. This should be conducted as soon as possible. The quicker we get these data, the quicker we can start setting some goals and actually start implementing some changes. Number 2, create a climate change action plan, which includes baseline data, greenhouse gas reduction targets, and climate mitigation strategies to be updated every 5 years or as needed. We see this as a living document that will be changed when appropriate. Number 3, produce an annual climate change action report to be presented to County Council and shared with the community. There will need to be publicity and outreach to residents so they're aware of its contents. And we are suggesting a condensed version of the report being made available to all residents, just like the annual water quality report that we all receive in the mail. Number 4, create an ongoing citizen body tasked to advise council on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Perhaps this is a continuation of the current task force in some form. It could be a new standing advisory board. It could be looped in with the Environmental Sustainability Board. That's for council to decide. Number 5, integrate the goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions, practices to achieve net zero, and other sustainability practices into all county government operations and interactions with the public. We assume that there will be some staffing additions or maybe redirection. Many other communities are hiring what's called a sustainability coordinator. So that is probably going to be a separate recommendation. And then also we'll need to provide information, recommendations, and education to residents, points of contact for the community and for other Los Alamos County boards and departments will need to be established and clear. Okay, the next few slides will discuss specific, we call them subcommittees, but for the final report, it's really just kind of the categories of the recommendations. The community planning and zoning recommendations are representative of best practices that we have researched and ideas we think will work for our community. This subcommittee has touched on 7 areas, and there's one sort of like asterisk in there. The first is addressing residential building stock to tackle greenhouse gas issues. Developing a stretch code to supersede the current building code with energy improvements and connections to help transition to cleaner electrical energy sources. We currently have a recommendation about a loan program repaid through utilities to help with retrofits like insulation and windows and things, but this idea does not conform to the New Mexico State Constitution's anti-donation clause. We're working to try to find some kind of compromise on this. I don't know if that would eventually be legislation or whatever. The city of Fort Collins, Colorado has this really great loan program. And the loan actually goes with the life of the house. And so you repay it monthly on your utility bill. And if you end up moving or whatever, it just goes with your house. And it includes things like insulation, replacement of windows, and other retrofits like mold remediation or asbestos. You know, as you do one thing, you find something else to do in your house. So that's kind of the one that might be removed. Also educating contractors and owners on the importance of selecting Energy Star appliances. We, Los Alamos County, can set an example with purchasing and contracting by incorporating an evaluation of CO2 in equivalents in our selection process. The county should advocate to state regulators for greater flexibility in code interpretation, especially with respect to replacement of in-kind modification. And lastly, we would love to see the county include some kind of commercial zoning in every section of town, such as a gathering place, like a coffee shop or a store, to minimize trips downtown and to encourage community gathering. Providing a depot near these areas will encourage public transportation use. Wouldn't it be so nice to have a coffee shop on like North or Bronco Mesa? The electricity supply and demand recommendations are next. Los Alamos County has already established that we care about net zero carbon emissions. The Department of Public Utilities has a goal of being net zero electrical power by 2040, and we can and should accelerate this timeline. We're suggesting 2035, as renewables are coming online faster and cheaper than we had previously thought. Currently, over 80% of our energy still comes from fossil fuels. The Uniper Wind and Solar Agreement, which starts next year, will lower that to about 70%, but it's still an issue. Back in August, the Board of Public Utilities discussed the cost of all all of our electricity sources in 2020, and the most expensive was coal from the San Juan power plant. The second most expensive was the free market short-term power purchase agreements, which are primarily gas. So combining one, our desire to reach net carbon zero as soon as reasonably possible, with two, the very low cost of wind and solar in Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico, and three, the fact that the second most expensive power acquired by Los Alamos County in 2020 was free market power purchase agreements, which are gas. Purchasing wind and solar in New Mexico would reduce our vulnerability to the price spikes we experienced in 2020. We should depend less on short-term power purchases and instead invest in local wind and solar. And we are suggesting storage as well. Which I guess I'll say, based on the best practices of other communities that we've researched, these are the kinds of things we're thinking can help us here in Los Alamos. We recommend acquiring much more wind and solar power in the short term and looking to other options such as nuclear for the long term. We recommend implementing a plan to manage increased intermittency. We expect this plan to include time of use incentives, lower prices at low demand times, higher prices at higher demand times, and storage, there we go, as part of a cost-effective plan. This could be in-house or it could be hired out to a consultant, and it should be part of the upcoming Integrated Resources Plan, the IRP you may have heard of, scheduled for 2020. Residential rooftop solar plus storage can be very useful in reducing peak power demands and other needs. Other small communities have done this best by purchasing storage and leasing it to those with solar panels. Residential PV, solar, and community solar have potential to support our net carbon zero electricity goals. Natural gas. So a few quick stats for you. Natural gas accounts for roughly 60,000 metric tons per year of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. Natural gas, the Board of Public Utilities has adopted a goal to phase out natural gas by 2070. Each of the roughly 7,700 households and businesses in Los Alamos County using gas will each require their own replacement solution for various reasons. More than 3/4 of gas use is residential, primarily for space heating. The simplistic answer of converting gas to traditional electric heating doesn't work. That's going to increase our electricity needs far more than our system capacity currently allows. We have outlined an engineering strategy, not yet in this draft in form of actionable policy recommendations, but it has been fleshed out and it will be included in the final report. So here are some ideas that we can be looking at as a county. For new construction, more compact architectures are more energy efficient. This is already driven by our land shortage here. Passive and rooftop solar heating can contribute a great deal, but 100% solar is challenging. Houses must have solar access, neighboring buildings and trees can't block it, for example. So it is a challenge. For both new and existing buildings, insulation is the most cost-effective approach to reducing natural gas use and emissions. This is ceiling insulation, envelope insulation, and that does include double and triple pane windows as part of that. As gas furnaces and boilers need replacement, homeowners should substitute electric heat pumps. Now, the trick is when your stove goes out, you're like, I need a stove, right? And you just go buy what you used to have. And so trying to make a plan ahead of time for maybe an induction stove might be good to sort of look ahead. Heat pumps can both heat and cool a home. Air conditioning will be more and more important as the climate warms. And heat pumps use much less electricity even today than traditional electric resistance heating. Secondary uses of gas have substitutes as well. Demands on the electrical system will increase. That's a guarantee, especially at night, which will likely require upgrading. We expect to make some quantitative estimates for the final report in terms of economics. Moving on to transportation. So if we look at the overall greenhouse gas emissions from residents, transportation makes up a substantial portion. Making reductions in this sector is important, and it's also something we have control over. Has anyone sat in traffic leaving White Rock at 5 p.m. and it's backed up from the light, like all the way in town, right? This is mostly due to single occupancy vehicles. Driving yourself is the most convenient way to get around and get all the things you need done. I totally get it. We need to make taking public transportation more convenient, and we need to incentivize it. We need to encourage and incentivize carpooling as well, and other healthy transportation alternatives, biking, etc. Large gains can be made by helping commuters from off the hill ride the bus or carpool, as well as local residents. And this is, again, this is Lanel, and they are aware of the problem. So it's not like they're not doing anything about it. We just can't do anything about their problem, but we can be partners. So moving on to the actual recommendations from transportation based off of what's been successful in other communities. We'd like to increase and incentivize public transportation ridership. Many communities and businesses incentivize public transit ridership or some other non-single occupancy vehicle way of getting to work and school. Carpooling, biking, walking, they have incentives for parking or not parking on their campus or whatever. Improving the bicycle and walking infrastructure to include more crosswalks. I would like to say, I think we have a really good bike path system in town. It's about to get better with that multi-use trail and extending the Canyon Rim Trail. But things like green boxing bike lanes, which is basically just a big strip of green paint in a bike lane, makes them more visible. So they're safer, they're more noticeable for drivers, and ultimately they're better for bikers. We would like to see a bike path between White Rock and Los Alamos, not on the main road, to encourage safe bike commuting. Increase publicly accessible electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Now, EV charging is going to become more and more important as more and more people and the county switch to EVs, electric vehicles. And speaking of increasing the number of electric vehicles in the Los Alamos County fleet and Atomic City Transit, eventually making Los Alamos 100% EV, hopefully sooner rather than later. This process is starting. The county has, I think, 4, if I'm not mistaken, EVs, but there might be 5. And I know that there are 1 or 2 electric buses on their way for Atomic City Transit, which is super exciting. The next recommendation is to implement shaded parking and a county-wide no idling policy. Idling is an unnecessary source of greenhouse gas emissions, and making residents aware of idling issues is really important. Many people idle because there's no shaded parking, at least at like the grocery store or outside of schools, and others idle without even thinking about it, or they want to warm up their truck or whatever. Shaded parking could house rooftop solar for the county or for businesses and schools. Sun shields should be standardly equipped in all county vehicles. Now, I will say the county does have a no idling policy for like county work trucks and things, and I don't know how it's enforced, but I'm talking about not just county, but like county employees, but like our community no idling. Continuing on to launching a municipal bike share program. Many communities have seen residents and visitors benefit from biking around town, not just greenhouse gas reduction, but it's also fun and it helps increase fitness for residents and visitors. I think the Transportation Board has discussed this as well. We'd like to encourage private electric vehicle purchase and charging during low peak hours. Obviously, we don't have control of what residents do, but we can inform and we can encourage. Power's also, in terms of charging, power's more expensive during peak times, and charging where there's lower demand reduces the load during these peak times and reduces the total quantity of power that Los Alamos needs access to, which makes it cheaper. So that's important. And then finally, converting municipal small engines like lawn and garden equipment and golf carts to be fossil fuel free. The Waste Consumption and Natural Resources Subcommittee was formed to address the significant portion of greenhouse gas emissions that the community is responsible for, but which fall outside the scope of the other subcommittees, to provide a truer accounting of our carbon footprint. We envision a future where all residents, businesses, and county employees understand their carbon footprint in detail and have many options available to reduce it. It is also important to address water and natural spaces in order to maintain a healthy, vibrant community and environment well into the future. We know that there are significant methane emissions associated with landfill waste. Environmental Services is already encouraging waste reduction, recycling, and composting. We recommend integrating zero waste principles and practices into all aspects of government, business, and community life in order to ultimately achieve 100% reduction of waste sent to the landfill. which we truck 90 miles down to Rio Rancho. Our research indicates that at least one third of our residents' total carbon footprint arises from the purchase, use, and disposal of goods, food, and services. And this is likely to be true for our businesses, schools, and government services as well. Other significant sources of greenhouse gas emissions include hydrofluorocarbon refrigerants and construction materials such as concrete and steel. There are many ways to reduce these emissions: education, reuse of goods, food waste prevention, and sort of green procurement guidelines, and these are detailed in our report. Resilience to increasing temperatures, prolonged drought, and shifts in seasonal precipitation are climate change effects which we're already seeing, and they require proactive planning to preserve the quantity and quality of our water and watershed. Similarly, the realities of wildfire and other threats to our natural spaces need careful management to ensure ongoing safety, environmental quality, and community well-being. Management of forests is important in order to maximize carbon sequestration. And all of these efforts will need support at the regional, state, and national levels. The good news is that most of these recommendations not only address climate change and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but they also provide opportunities for economic benefits and improvements to health, equity, and environment, as well as quality of life. And most can be implemented right now. So community outreach and education will be necessary, and it's so important for all of these goals in all of the areas. We want the community to be part of the solution and to be engaged in the process and its changes. We have lots of ideas on how to get the public engaged. Most of these have already happened or are kind of in the works right now. This really should be the community's project. The timeline, excuse me, moving forward, our interim report was submitted in August. This was a snapshot of time where the task force was. These recommendations are representative of best practices that we have researched and ideas we think will work for our community. These have already changed, grown, and some have even been eliminated. Our final report is due in February of 2022. So we would love your feedback and we would love your participation. If you'd like to attend a meeting, we meet every other Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. via Zoom. If you'd like to hop on a subcommittee, or if you just want to attend and see what's going on and listen, we'd love an email. If you want to read the document and send us some feedback, or if you'd like to help us edit the final document, we would love any and all help that you'd be willing to provide. So thank you again for having me. I'm so honored to be here, and I'd like to thank the County Council for their support of this task force as well. So with that, I think I'll stop sharing and I will be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Okay, so why is this that I can't do this? Okay, I see me. So does anyone have a question to begin with? Maura? You're muted. It's the new words of our life, right? You're muted.
Hey, you're muted. Yeah. Put $1 in the jar.
And I never remember.
Hey, Caroline. I just want to thank Katie for that amazing presentation. Katie is my friend and neighbor, and I'm just amazed at the amount of work that's been put in by this committee. That's a huge amount of information in just a short while that they've compiled, and to be able to present it in this manner is just amazing. I looked, it's been like 23 minutes and she's already given us a full tour of what this committee does. I would like to ask Katie if she could maybe recommend a couple or 3 or 4 immediate things that a group like this could do. From when you look at the big picture, what could we do when we walk away from our screen? Do you have some ideas that simple ideas that people could immediately put into effect that would make a big difference?
Yes, well, thank you for the question and thank you for the kind words. My initial reaction to this question is reduce the amount of food that you waste. And people always are like, well, I don't waste food. And I used to think that too. And then I paid attention to, we've all got that, like the strawberries that go moldy or the lettuce that gets all gross. You forget about the cilantro in your crisper. We all do it. And it's not a guilt thing. It's just about being a little bit more aware and a little bit more intentional about your meal planning. Make a list, sort of go shopping in your own cupboard and fridge first Oh, do I have lettuce? I should probably use that lettuce first before I buy more. You can always soak fruit, mostly veg, pretty much any vegetable you can soak for like an hour in a bowl of cold water and it'll like plump up again. This works great with, well, pretty much everything I've tried: celery, carrots, lettuce, whatever. It saves you from throwing things away. Composting is really nice, but composting sometimes is that easy. Well, like, oh, well, I'm not throwing it away, I'm composting it, right? And so it is still wasted. It's nice that it goes into a garden. If you don't compost at home, I have 3 neighbors who bring me their compost and I just put it in my bin. So maybe you can connect with somebody who's willing to take your scraps, or if you're willing to host their scraps, there's also a Facebook group. I think it's called Facebook Composters or something. I can send that link if you like. I think a few other things is, you know, advocacy, which of course League of Women Voters is really good at. And I just want to say as an aside, I so appreciate the voters pamphlet you guys put out every election cycle. It's so helpful. You know, writing a letter to county council, supporting, you know, action, you know, taking action for climate change, maybe writing a letter to state legislators, the governor's already on board, but the more people she hears from, you know, it's like extra support for what's going on. And then I think just, you know, being intentional about trying to carpool when you can. If you're comfortable riding the bus, great. If you're not, you know, trying to do all your shopping trips in one go, maybe try not to go to Santa Fe or Albuquerque quite so much. If you have the means, getting insulation in your house, replacing windows, those are really key. Our window replacement, you know, it's not cheap, but we already can feel that our house is so much warmer and it's been a week. It's staggering, really. And then we're going to get 2 inches of foam insulation and stucco on the outside. And so we'll be much warmer this winter. We're really looking forward to seeing how much our gas bill lowers. If again, you have the means and you're looking to replace things like a furnace with a heat pump, or a gas stove with an induction stove, I got to say, I love cooking on my gas stove. I get it. And induction stoves are really cool. They're like the kind that they use on the Great British Bake Off. So anyway, those are some things just off the top of my head that you can do, some big, some small, some personal, some a little bit more, you know, citizen wide. And if you would like some more, I would be happy to receive emails and email you back. So thank you for the question. Carol, do I call in people or are you the facilitator?
Which I don't, okay, but I just see Mia. I'm
Hi.
just doing as people.
That's fine.
I can do it, sure. And then Jesse. Okay.
Thank you, Katie, for your presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I've been a Western area resident for 22 years and have had opportunities to add insulation, replace windows, have a point of service boiler, a few things. And I've been interested in gray water and black water recycling for a while, but haven't found a venue through the county. Also, I'm concerned about electric vehicles because the carbon footprint is actually left behind at the factories that make the batteries. So I just want to comment on that. Also, I think for public transportation, it would mean more vehicles and schedules that are more convenient, like throughout the day rather than just at rush hour for high school and Lannel. One other thing, I really appreciate your working to develop the building code. That's one of the things I think is most important here. Most of our houses went up in the 40s or 60s, and we actually have quite a bit of recyclable steel and iron under the houses, as well as copper piping and some aluminum wiring. Those all need to be upgraded, in my opinion, to PEX, plastic draining, and maybe recycling those items. The cast iron, that's valuable. One other thing about, I appreciate your idea about shaded parking, but I'm wondering if the shaded parking would be appropriate during winter for the sake of snow load, or to have, the solar gain when you're in your car in the winter, as you probably feel right now. You're glad to have greenhouse effect in your car right now. So the shading, I think, needs to be kind of based on slats rather than solid surfaces. So I don't know how that would affect the placement of solar panels above it. Those are just ideas off the top of my head. I'm also interested in, as I said, black water and gray water, the golf course, the schools, the pond. I'd like the idea of green procurement. So thank you very much for all you've contributed so far. Okay, and I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I didn't really have a question. So.
That's all right. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate those. I'm kind of taking mental notes right now. And if you'd be willing to send me an email with some of those, then I kind of have documentation like, hey, I heard from a community member.
Sure.
This is what people are saying. That would be really good. Just really quick. And Jesse, I see your hand, so I haven't forgotten about you. I just want to comment about the transit. So there are Atomic City Transit is well aware of, they lost all their ridership during the pandemic. They're trying to get it back. And also these traditional like circulating buses may not be the most efficient way to do it, right? You see buses going around that are just empty and you're like, is this reducing greenhouse gases if nobody's riding this giant bus? So they are being very thoughtful and creative about FedEx, about looking into new types like microtransit. And, there's also this like last mile, like if you live more than a mile from a bus stop, people are less likely to take the bus because you have to get extra effort to get there. And they're aware of all of these things. And so please know that they're aware of them and they're working on the problems. And then to the gray water, I don't know. So I used to live in Oregon, and like homes had gray water capture systems. You could recycle it into your yard and all kinds of cool things. And I think that New Mexico's not quite where Oregon is right now, but the county council and particularly like the public utilities needs to hear this from people. So that's important. And then lastly, what was the other thing you said?
Batteries.
Yes. Yes. So I totally appreciate that electric vehicles are not carbon neutral. They do take from the earth. They require they're not carbon neutral, right? But there have been multiple analyses about like, okay, if you just drove an old, like, a 90s car until it died versus getting an EV, who comes out ahead, right? In terms of emissions and all the other things that go with it, mining and human rights and that kind of stuff. And EVs win. And I can send you information on that, but it is good to know that they're not just like the magic switch to make everything go away. So thank you for bringing that up.
I own a home in Fort Collins, and you're welcome to go there anytime and stay for free. We have Los Alamos residents who retire there, many of my friends, and their program is awesome. I'm going to retire there sometime. So if you want to get in, with the mayor up there, he's really awesome about, sharing the community progress and ideas. So
yeah, thank you so much. That's very kind.
You're welcome.
All right. I think we'll go to Jesse next.
I just had a few comments. One thing is that New Mexico up in Taos does use gray and black water at the tire houses. Individual houses have their own living water systems. In Taos, there's a very, very fancy hotel and spa. And I took my students there in sustainable community development. And in that hotel, all the water that was used came from the hotel, including water, gray water, and black water. So it shows that can be done here and in New Mexico. The other, I had a question. Are the schools using those compact composters so that all the food from school waste goes into the compact and compost? Do we have that here in Los Alamos?
Not yet. I can tell you that the county and the schools would like to become better partners. I've actually spoken myself with Jennifer Guy at the schools, and she said, we really want to get on this green train. We kind of don't know where to start. We're not ready to just like jump into the pool. We kind of need to plan and make some steps. A couple years ago, before the pandemic, I can't remember who, Chartwell's is the food provider for the schools. There was a guy who worked for them who was really totally engaged in all this kind of sustainable and like eating better and not having plastic utensils. And we got like trays and forks and everything. And A, the pandemic happened, and B, there is kind of a practicality issue about collecting compost at the schools. And I was a high school teacher for 13 years in Corvallis, Oregon. I implemented composting at 2 high schools there. And so it is doable and it should be done, but there's kind of a lot of things that need to get in the queue before it just starts.
Well, do you know that these machines take the compost from, say, the lunch line?
Mhm.
It goes into the machine and it compacts it.
Mhm.
It's not that you're gathering compost and putting it outside. It's that you're putting it in a machine and then it's composted, and then the schools can use it as the teaching illustration to the students, that you can put the compost around the trees and flowers at the school. It's a very good learning experience. I don't know the cost of one of these machines today. I've seen them in some of the schools in Santa Fe. So I think that would be something to really consider. It's nice that we're doing individual things at the house. I mean, I've done worm composting for years, but I think we need to branch out and go where the big food is and where it's going. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you so much. Please know that we are in contact with the schools, and yes, Jody mentioned that Chimisa has a composting program, and it's every school is kind of in a different place right now, but eventually we'd really like to make that happen. The Santa Fe Public Schools do an amazing job with collecting compost, lunch compost from all the schools, and then they take it, their Reunity Resources is in charge of that. And but Lisa Randall is the sustainability coordinator for Santa Fe Public Schools. And she's just,
Lisa.
Yeah, she's amazing. And she's worked really hard over many years to get that going. And so she is our beacon of light and our model, and we hope to follow in her footsteps. So thank you very much for the comment. If anyone else has a question or a comment, I'm happy to take that. I did put my email in the chat. You would be welcome to, in your newsletter or whatever, you're welcome to use that, put that email in there. If people lose it or like, oh, I can't find it or whatever, I'm happy to have you do that. Actually, let me put the task force email in there as well. And task force.
So one of the things I was thinking, Katie, is and since this is being recorded, which is great because other people can go, and I know Mara will probably write something about this and put that down. But if you send an email with some of the answers of things that you've been talking about, you could send it to, you could send it to me or Becky Shanklin, and we would just send it out to everybody, because I think that, everyone can't come to one, how that some people like work, but
what's that like?
or they have other things. But I think it's such an important topic that I think that it would be good that we maybe send it to everyone. At least the league would get it. Okay. And we could put a link on our website which is already there. And this is a community event. This is not you have to belong to the league to come. It's not that way at all. It's a community event. So I think the more people who hear about this, the better it is, just in general. So, and I'm going to send you some questions because I'm sorry I had to take a phone call during the
That's
middle of
okay.
it. So
No problem.
I will be listening, and so I don't repeat it. But I do thank you for coming. Does anyone have anything else you want to talk? I guess the chat just has email address.
Caroline, Becky has her hand raised.
Where's Becky?
I'm right. I'll just speak.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
And then Mia,
First-
okay?
First, I just have to say that what Katie did in, I don't know, what did she say, 23 minutes? Was absolutely astonishing because she really summed up all these ideas that we've been working on, and they're so important. And I would add one more thing, which is free cycle, because that's so simple. And I think there might be one time that nobody wanted my whatever it was, but most of the time it's useful to somebody. And it makes me feel so good that it didn't go into the landfill. Anyway, and then I have one other comment, which is Katie put up her email and the task force email, and it lasted just long enough that I got to the @ and I couldn't get the rest. So you might want to put those up again, but absolutely we'll put them in our newsletter.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm just making a couple quick notes here about how to respond to the questions that were given. Okay. Yeah, that's a really good comment about the free cycle. I'm on Facebook free all the time. Getting rid of stuff, picking up stuff. It's just such a nice thing. And there are several different ways of doing that. If you're not on Facebook, that's fine. There are other ways of doing that. So yeah, that's great. And then Mia, I think I saw your hand again.
Yes, I had two ideas when you were talking about incentive, and I've been hoping that there is an incentive in the cost of, residential utility reduction, but also I used to be on solid waste management and advisory, and I tried very hard to push pay per throw, which means that you pay exactly what you discard, and of course met with great opposition from landlords and who are the others? I guess just people who don't like change in general. So those are two ideas I'd still like to see if we could include those. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you. And then Becky and Jesse, your hands are up, but I just want to see if that's a leftover or if you have another comment.
I just don't know how to get the hand down.
Sounds good. At the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see, there should be like a lower hand button where you clicked raised hand. It should say lower hand now.
And there's one right up there where the raised hand was too. You can click on the raised hand.
There you go.
One thing I'd like to say, only because before we moved here 30 years ago, we lived in California, who also has no water. And so what we started doing, and we just continued doing, is we use those, I don't know, 3-gallon buckets or something, light enough that you can pick that up. So it's not like one of those giant 5-gallon paint kind of containers, but just a regular little bucket that are $3 or $4, probably made in China and made of plastic. Okay. But anyway, we use them in the shower every single time because it takes, I don't know why, I don't understand it, but anyway, it takes between 2 of those filled almost to the top, but not that I could lift it, or 3. So I have 3 actually in the shower, and we just put the shower head in or turn on the water. And when it fills up and it's hot, you turn it off, you put the bottle, you take your buckets out, and we use them for watering indoor plants or the plants on the deck, or I take them out in front and put them in the pots. And then, we've just done it for so long, but when you consider there are just 2 of us, but still that could be 6, 10 gallons of water a day. And it's easy because it's easier to water the pots, to be honest. But it's just something very small, because we have all those bad things that you talked about. Gas, we have gas because we don't have any electricity there. So then you have to get 220 wiring to have a electric stove, right? And we have gas, and then you have gas water heaters, and then we'd have to change this whole thing. And then, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's a lot. And then you kind of think, well, let's see, how long will I live here? And how much am I willing and able to spend to upgrade to everything that you said? And no one's arguing the point. We do have passive solar. We do have double pane windows. We do have stucco over wood and 40 insulation. So, I mean, we have a lot of that stuff, but you're absolutely right. And it's really hard. And I had this question because I know my husband might ask this. So when we get to electric vehicles, there's still going to be gas, right? Because some people have like little sports cars and they're not going to give those up.
Yeah. So gas is around. It's not going away. Eventually, automakers are not going to be making combustion engines anymore. This is happening a little bit quicker in other areas of the world. Our automakers are kind of getting on board now, but gas cars are going to be around. I mean, I drive a gas car. Many of us drive gas cars. It's not like in 2040, they're just going to shut off all the pumps. And that kind of loops around to something else I wanted to say was that I personally experience a lot of guilt about things, well, about many things, but particularly about my carbon footprint. And every time I forget something at Smith's and have to go back downtown and I'm like, oh, I asked a neighbor, are you going? No, I'm not going today. I've tried all the things. And, it's like my driving to Smith's again is not going to make or break the situation. And you're like, yeah, but if you do it 20 times and you're like, I mean, there are podcasts out there, you can crunch the numbers. The truth is, I say this not as a depressing, don't do anything kind of way, but the truth is your individual carbon footprint doesn't matter. It doesn't. It is so small. If you look at the numbers, I'm just talking mathematics here. If you look at the numbers, your carbon footprint will not change anything. But your actions can spur other people into actions. It feels good to take action, and there's no sense in waste, right? There's no sense in just wasting for waste's sake. So I'm not saying don't do all the good things about your shower buckets and buying an electric vehicle and recycling and all these kinds of things, because I think we all feel empowered by our actions, and I mean, in a sense, they do add up, but also. It's the advocacy, right? Like me and my hyper recycling and my whatever it is else I do at the house, those are important to me and I'm not going to stop doing them. But when I share that with my family, when I share that with my friends, when I join a group like La Res, or when I talk to the League of Women Voters, that it has that effect of spreading, and that can lead to people writing letters to Congress people who start to take action. And so your actions do matter. But I would just say, try not to get bogged down in the guilt. I've been also talking to myself, try not to get bogged down in your guilt. Because when you go to the grocery store and you buy food that comes in plastic, that's how our food comes, right? And we're all trying to reduce our plastic consumption, but that's how our food is packaged. And, you can reduce your meat consumption and you can not eat dairy and you can do all these other things. And that does help. But if you do have cheese or if you do eat meat, don't feel too guilty about it. Like, we've got to live and we've got to enjoy and we've got to do things. So do what you can, try not to fly. If you fly, don't feel too guilty about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Becky?
We all thank you for us a little bit.
And then Becky, you're on mute.
I know. So a couple other little things. If you fly, there are carbon offsets. You
Yes, there
can
are.
buy trees. So that's probably a good idea. But the other thing, I was just curious, doesn't it help quite a bit if you buy from the co-op locally grown things? And quite often they're not packaged in plastic. So,
depending on what it is.
yeah, I know. It just, obviously it does, but
Yeah, I mean, my own personal preference, like when I go to the farmer's market, I would rather buy something local. Like if I have to choose between organic that's from far away and local that's not organic but close, I tend to buy the closer one because it's not being driven for hundreds of
Right.
miles.
Yeah.
But there's a program called Living on Earth. You might listen to it on NPR regularly. Anyway, they had this thing a week or two ago about really, in the end, like if you're going to buy organic produce from China versus sustainable beef from Brooklyn or down the street, the beef actually has a much higher carbon footprint than the apples from China, even though they're shipped across halfway across the world, just because like animal agriculture takes so much water and other things, methane emissions, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not telling anybody they have to change their dietary habits, but that meat and dairy consumption is a really big part of that. And we don't eat tons of meat in my house. I don't know that I could totally give up dairy, but we are paying more attention to it. And the truth is, we don't miss it. But everybody's different. And yes, buying things in bulk, if you bring your own bags or whatever, that reduces waste. But the truth is it's not significant in terms of the packaging. But it feels better not to keep throwing away those things.
And anybody else? Take your moment. No. Well, I will just end by saying during the pandemic, when I wasn't even leaving my house, I must have 5,642 plastic bags because they weren't giving you, what do I want to say? They weren't, that you couldn't use your own bags. And my neighbor was actually shopping for me. But I will say this, which is kind of a sad comment. When I was then going to pick up my own food, order it online and then go pick it up, it was in plastic bags, but they were amazing plastic bags. You can reuse them about 125 times, it says. And I think that's probably true. And then I was distributing my plastic in the little barrel, which of course was full. What else? And they were throwing them away. Kroger's, whatever, Smith's was throwing them away. They said, oh, they're too hard to pack. So I took a bunch of them because I will say that when I went to St. Elizabeth's and also the Pete's Place, they use those bags because then people have something. They are a much stronger, better plastic bag than those flimsy things, which I hate. And I said, just put it in my cart. I'll leave it in my car. I just can't stand those. So it's kind of interesting that they're throwing them away. Just putting it out there because they're very much wanting them. And you're right. I know that what I do doesn't make a huge difference for anyone, but
don't let that get you down. Keep doing it.
Yeah, it makes me feel better, and I am
right
thing. But I do have gas cars. I'm going to say that too. So,
quick question: when is Kroger's or Smith's? They said they were going to ban the single-use plastic bag. When is that going to happen? And should we be encouraging them?
Yes, you should. So Kroger has this, and like I should just be really careful about how I phrase this. Kroger has big public, we're going green and we're doing all these amazing things. And while I understand that it takes time to implement systems and change behaviors and convince employees and managers and things that all these need to happen, I think it's been a slow sell here. And so anything you could, I believe we have a new manager at Smith's fairly recently. I think if you can advocate at Smith's, that would be good. It's really nice to see that they put like damaged produce or produce that's going to kind of go on that little reduced track, because the food waste really is, I mean, I hate the plastic bags too. I'm all about a plastic bag ban. We had one in Corvallis. I love it. But if you're just looking at like weightiness, like the heavy hitters, the food waste is so much bigger than plastic bags, even though it's horrible to, see them flying across the road and implanted in cacti. And, it's like the state flag of New Mexico, right? They're flapping in the breeze out there, and I hate them too. So yes, I think you should advocate for that. And I would love to join you in that. I did see that, about a year ago, they put those glass doors on all the refrigerated items to help kind of keep in some of that cooling. So that was, for me, I was like, hallelujah, this is a step. So there's
And I
that.
have two more hands up, Katie.
Okay.
I don't know, Becky, if yours is still up or,
Down.
but Barbara's is up, right?
Right, so I'm responding to the question about Kroger's. It's when they made their announcement, they said that our Smiths, it might have been the Smiths in New Mexico, they gave a date, and I believe it was 2023.
Thank you for that. That's good information. Let's hold them to it.
Right.
Yeah. And, there's some comments in the chat too about reusing the bags. Of course, reusing is better than just single use, reusing until they fall apart. That's great. You can put them in the recycle bin, whether or not they end up in the recycling. But the truth is the recycling in your blue cart, does that go anywhere? It feels good. We don't know what happens to it, right? It might just be expensive trash. So, don't let it get you down, but it's kind of like a finger in the dike, it's just.
I just think there's a lot of fingers and dikes in it.
Yeah, we just
Better than
kind of need a
dry.
system overhaul. So.
No, it is. What really I think should be happening is all these scientists ought to be figuring a way to get rid of plastic. Just saying. We can send people to Mars, and
Yep.
maybe we could figure a way to get rid of plastic, because let me just say this. I love my plastic. I don't like those
Convenient.
glass jars, and I do buy them because they're heavy for me. And there are a lot of people for whom they, or you drop them. And that's a problem. And
Right.
you may have plastic bottles for your baby, or plastic toys, or I'm just saying it's because it's everywhere. But anyway, Jessie has, I think, your hand up. Does that sound right, Jessie?
Yes, I have my hand up because this is one thing that the League of Women Voters can do for advocacy. It's everyone send letters to Smiths, have a letter writing campaign. I know I was zero waste coordinator for the Sierra Club when we banned plastic bags in Santa Fe. And we sent out conveys to everyone. All they had to do was press a button, and a letter went to every council member from us. And we had just about, I think, everyone in the Sierra Club sent in letters. So I think with the influence of the League of Women Voters and the way people look up to this organization, the home company of Kroger's would definitely look at several hundred worth of letters coming from one area. And see, there was something else I was going to say in regard to what was said, but that's sort of the basic thing, that if the League of Women Voters can do anything, I think we could get plastic bags out of Los Alamos, except for cats. I have a cat, and I like my few little plastic bags for the litter box. I have to admit it.
Well, luckily for you, Carol has 5,722,603, and so you'll never run out.
It was like, at the end,
I knew there was a good reason for joining this organization.
Put them on free cycle.
Put them on free. There's also bread bag. I mean, everything comes in a bag, right? Tortilla bags, whatever. So they're not going away.
Well, thank you, Katie. It's 1:00. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Remember,
Thank you.
don't make appointments for the third Thursday. Of course, that's always when I seem to do that, but try not to do that, because we certainly will be meeting in December, and it will be on the 15th. And we will hear Patrick, and we'll hear about Bandelier. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you
for
very
coming.
much for having me. I really appreciate what your
Thank you,
organization
Katie.
does for our community.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.